So, weather-related pop songs, I would normally go for Umbrella by Rhiannon.
Oh, my kids love
Yep.
that song.
See,
Nah.
Crowded House Girl.
But today, our weather-related pop song is by Snap, I've Got the Power.
I have no idea what
Yeah,
that
you
song
know that
is.
song.
I know that song.
You know?
I know. I finally know a pop culture
yeah.
reference.
Yeah.
Yep,
Well, it's not,
and
it's
I'm
a
going to get Zach
subculture
to play that over in the edit. But why are we choosing that one today? Can you guess, Sarah?
Something to do with weather resources, I imagine.
Yes, it's because weather doesn't just make us wet or dry when we go outside. The weather is a powerful resource.
It is.
But is it unlimited? And can we rely on it to power our lives throughout the 21st century and beyond?
Let's speak to someone with the answers. My name's Sarah Perkins Kirkpatrick, and I'm a Professor of Climate Science at the Australian National University in Canberra.
I'm Iain Strachan, a former journalist turned science communicator. We're members of the Australian Research Council's Centre of Excellence for the Weather of the 21st Century.
And this is Totally Cooked, the Climate and Weather podcast.
Okay. Well, we promised you a guest, and a guest you shall have. Today we're joined by Associate Professor Ailie Gallant of Monash University.
Ailie is an expert on drought and climate variability and leads the Weather Resources Project at 21st Century Weather. Welcome to the show, Ailie.
Thank you.
It says,
Excited to be here.
It says allow time here for natural conversation and preamble. Go.
Go, yep.
Preamble.
Your turn.
Thank you for joining us. How do you feel about talking about weather resources?
I feel excited. I love the weather. I'm a weather nerd, so this is what I like talking about, and quite frankly, boring everybody in my life with every single day.
This is
I
your
can
opportunity
totally relate
to
to
not
this.
bore people then. Like everyone.
Well, no, literally,
Everyone wants to hear
quite
this.
literally, I have put a friend of mine to sleep talking about clouds before. So,
Can you talk us through that more? Like what were you saying to them?
well, no, she couldn't get to sleep. We were having a girls' weekend. She couldn't get to sleep, and she's like, "You talk about boring stuff. Can you tell me about clouds?"
Ouch.
Yeah, that hurts.
And so I did. I started talking about clouds and different cloud types, and eventually she was snoring. So there we go. It worked.
Well, what does she do? Is she an action hero or a spy? Like, what's her job?
No, she's
Yeah.
a teacher.
Oh,
Actually, well, no, she's not a teacher now. She was a teacher at the time, though. Yeah. Well, the kids exhaust her,
Yeah.
right? So.
you think
But
you
she just
wouldn't need any help sleeping?
Well, yeah, I know, but kids and your mind races. So why not talk about clouds? They're lovely.
Better than
They're
counting
sometimes
sheep.
fluffy. They're sometimes not. They're sometimes made of ice. They're sometimes made of water.
Are you starting to doze off, Iain?
I'm just thinking like Ailie could do like a sleep cast about clouds.
Oh,
Yes, you
Has anyone have you used a sleep cast before, Sarah?
No, I haven't. I think my mind
Yeah.
will concentrate too much on what they're saying, but I know some people find them really effective.
We do a sound walk with my kids every night, which is like a little kind of nature walk where they're describing things, and it's really lovely.
That's
I
nice.
almost fall asleep to it myself if I'm sitting in with it.
If you have the paid version of Headspace, the meditation app, they have some really nice sleep casts, and they have things like Cat Marina, where you go to a marina full of houseboats. We would call them barges in the UK. And on each boat is a different type of cat with a different personality. And you meet all the cats, and the narrator talks to you about what they get up to and what they do on the boat, and then you fall asleep.
That's
Wow.
really trippy. I'm also really allergic to cats, so that's hell for me.
Well, there's also Midnight Laundrette is another one.
Okay.
Sheets turning
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. You listen to the machines going, and you
Wow.
hear about the people who are washing their sheets.
Oh my gosh.
There's many. They're good.
I feel like the cloud conversation could fit in here quite
It could
nicely.
be really
Yes,
good.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. We should suggest a partnership with Headspace.
There you go. Do
Should.
it.
Maybe they can become a sponsor of the podcast.
Yeah, they could do. Okay, we'll look into it.
Yep.
Great. Good thinking. All right. Good preamble.
Yes.
So, Ailie, what do we mean when we say weather resources?
Good question.
Thank
So-
you. Thank you so much. Done my job.
There we go. So weather resources, we're really talking about how the weather basically fuels our everyday lives. We're talking about weather that spins the wind turbines that bring us energy. We're talking about the rays of the sun that come down on the solar panels that give us energy. We're talking about wind that dries our clothes when we're hanging them on the Hills hoist out in the backyard, beach weather, skiing weather, maybe not so much anymore, but, everything that kind of makes that we really don't think about actually. We don't think about it during the day. We kind of just head out and go, oh yeah, I'll put a jumper on. Or I won't put a jumper on, or I'll, should I take an umbrella today? That is the weather that happens in our everyday lives that we don't think about, but it is a resource for our everyday lives. We feel happy when we see sunshine. Concreters can't pour their concrete if it's raining. So when we think about weather, we need to kind of reframe how we think of it as a resource rather than how we usually think of it, which is a hazard, right? We usually think of it as a risk, but most of the time it's not a risk. It's actually a resource.
Concreters also have to be like concerned about how quickly, like in hot weather when you're driving with it mixing.
Exactly. And curing and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, this is the point, is it touches everything. I mean, just another example, airlines, right? They can save a lot of money if they can catch a jet stream up in the upper atmosphere and get to where they need to go quicker because they don't use as much fuel. So, it is a resource. It is something that you can use to make our lives better. And that is what we mean by weather as a resource.
It's an interesting point you make as well about how most of the time it's not a hazard. This episode will be on the air later in 2025, but right now we've got really damaging flooding in New South Wales, which obviously is, hazardous and is, in fact, deadly, but also, hugely impactful in a negative way on people's lives. But most of the time, most places day to day, it's just normal weather that we really rely on to moderate or, modify how we live our lives.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, most of the time we're not even thinking about it. This is the point. But I suppose what we want to do is start thinking about it because we think it's really important.
I really wasn't thinking about it this morning. I saw the synoptic chart on the TV in the gym yesterday and it said it was going to rain.
Yeah.
And then I woke up this morning, put on a fleece and not a raincoat, didn't bring an umbrella. And I thought, I knew this.
Yeah.
And I work with Australia's best weather scientists. I'm about to record a podcast about the weather. And it's like, and I still didn't bring an umbrella.
Yeah, but you know what? I didn't either.
Didn't you?
And I am that weather scientist.
So I guess we should resign and close the podcast.
Yeah, that's it.
So I've got 2 umbrellas in my now. One I left here, which is very useless on a day like today. And the other one is one of my kids' umbrellas because I didn't want to use my husband's Rick and Morty umbrella this morning.
Has your husband got a Rick and Morty umbrella?
He loves Rick and Morty.
Oh,
so
wow. Yes. I'm a fan. It's dark.
Oh, really? It is dark.
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Really?
I'm not cool like that.
He's hard into it. I've tried, but it's just a bit too much for me.
Yeah, it's abrasive and very cynical.
I don't mind the abrasiveness or the cynicism. I used to love watching Family Guy, but yeah, I know it's something I just haven't been able to click with that show.
Yeah, no worries.
So 21st Century Weather, who we all work for, is leading this new thinking on weather resources. But why are we starting to talk about weather as a resource?
The real reason we're starting to talk about weather as a resource is because, as I said, it really does fuel our everyday lives, right? It's so important in our everyday lives, but we also know that our weather is changing, right?
Yeah.
Climate change is weather change. And so we really need to understand how weather in that resource frame is changing because we need to know whether, that side of things is, are we going to have more days where we actually can't pour the concrete on construction sites? Are we going to have better concreting weather? Are we going to have beach days in the summer that are just too hot and actually we need to think about moving the summer holidays because we can't go outside during the summer? Actually, it's better off to move them to kind of March or April or something like that because then the weather is in a nicer condition that we can actually go to the beach and enjoy being outdoors because it's not ridiculously windy or hot or whatever it is. So I think this is the point, is the resource side of weather makes our lives livable in so many different ways. And so if we want to be able to, I suppose, maintain our lifestyles, we better know how the weather is changing. And it's not just for our lifestyles, it's also for industry and the economy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously businesses want to do everything in the most efficient way they can. We want to produce electricity in the most efficient way that we can. So we better know where these resources are and where they're going to be. This is the most important part, where they're likely going to be and going to change, because they are going to change. So where we put a wind farm now or where we put a solar farm now is not necessarily where we want to put one in the future. How can we optimize that electricity grid so that if we do get what we might call a wind drought, so there's no wind and we can't get that energy from the wind turbines, well, that's okay because we've got solar farms elsewhere that can supplement that electricity. But we need to know that. We need to know how that's changing into the future, because otherwise we're not going to be able to use the weather as efficiently as we could. And, ultimately it's to make our lives better. So we want to make sure that we're harnessing that resource as best we can.
Yeah, great. Cool. I mean, I'm looking at my script here and it says, brackets, if not already addressed, that it's not just about sunlight and wind. It's not just about water. I haven't talked about
water, actually.
Yeah, I mean, so feel free, oh.
Jeez.
Oh, dear. Oh, no.
It's Lucia. Should we chat to her?
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? I'm here with Ailie and Sarah recording a podcast.
Hi, Lucia.
Now you're on it.
Hi, Lucia.
Hi. We're good. Okay, no worries. I'll chat to you later. Bye. Bye.
I want to hear
I
the silly
thought it
comment.
could have
I
been
wanna
business
hear-
critical, Neryl's Arctic boat has sunk and the partnership
Oh, God,
portfolio is
don't
going
say
down
so.
with it or something.
In my teaching recently, I've had an energy expert come and give a couple of guest lectures, and they showed this really fascinating slide. Like it was a circle over just a smallish fraction of the Northern Territory, and said that if we had solar panels covering this entire area, it would generate enough electricity for the whole entire world.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I've
So
seen that.
of course, that's not something we can do feasibly, but it just goes to emphasize the potential and how much we can generate from weather resources.
Well, you say it's not something we can do feasibly. Like, I think I've seen that as well. And it's
Okay.
probably on a map of Australia, it doesn't look like a huge area, but it's probably like the size of, Scotland or something, right?
Yeah, maybe even
No, it's not that big.
England
It's
and
like-
Scotland.
Isn't it? It's only like a couple of 100 Ks or something from memory. I can't
I
remember.
thought it
but
was
it's
a bit bigger, but but still, we're not we're not going to go and put solar
Yeah.
panels all through
Yeah.
Kakadu or anything
Why not?
like that.
Well, no, but the point is if that's distributed, right? Because this is the point
Yeah,
of,
yes,
of weather resources,
exactly.
right? Is if you have that single location covered by all those solar panels, well, that's great. But then what happens if a tropical cyclone hits it? Or what happens if the clouds go over it? Like you get thick cloud for weeks on weeks.
Yeah.
But if you have a distributed network where you know that, actually when it's sunny here, it's much more likely to be cloudy here, or when it's not windy at all here, it's super likely to be sunny here, you can distribute that network to really make sure that we don't have this energy grid that fails, because this is one of the big things that is being discussed at the moment, particularly as we move further and further towards renewables, as we seem to be doing at the moment, is there's genuine and legitimate questions around how that grid will support our electricity needs and concerns about blackouts and things, simply because that baseload power from the coal-fired power stations is going to be reduced. And so there's kind of this worry that, well, hang on, what if the sun doesn't shine? Does this mean we're going to lose power and whatnot? But I think this is the point of research like this, is that we actually have all this information that we really haven't tapped into yet that can identify where within the existing transmission network we can put this stuff so that that is much less likely to happen. So then why not use that information to really build the best grid we can?
Well, my question was going to be, how well planned is the distribution of Australia's renewable energy resources so far? Like, how consciously chosen are the sites that they're being placed on? And how much are the people developing them drawing on weather and climate information to make those decisions as things stand?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the short answer is I think they're drawing on what information they can. I think you've got a couple of limitations, right? You've got the existing transmission network, and that is a big limitation, because the point is that you need to be able to, you can produce your energy, but you need to be able to transport it. And building those transmission lines, you don't want to put it, yes, of course, it would be great to have a huge solar farm in the middle of Australia where the weather's usually fairly benign and it's sunny all the time. But the point is you'd have to build thousands and thousands of kilometres of transmission lines, and that is not feasible. And so you are hamstrung in that sense basically by where the population is and therefore where the transmission lines are. But within that, you can obviously optimise things. So, for example, here in Victoria or even in New South Wales, what they do tend to do is build solar farms, either if you're in New South Wales west of the ranges or in Victoria north of the ranges, because the interaction between the topography and clouds is such that it tends to be clearer more of the time on what we call the leeward side of the mountains, so the opposite side to where the wind's generally coming from. Just because it's clearer there, that's where solar farms are better to have, right? Away from the coast, so you don't get that kind of low cloud all the time. Likewise, you want to put wind turbines closer to the coast because of things like sea breezes, which are fairly consistent, and it tends to be a lot windier near the coast, right? So absolutely using those types of information. But I think one of the issues for us is that data sets to come up with that information don't exist in a way that has been robustly tested before. So people are using the data that they can. Right. And they're using their own data and things like that. But there's lots of questions around how the variability in the wind resource, for example. Can we get years where wind power would just be reduced for months on end because of these wind droughts? And, a paper from a couple of years ago shows, yes, it can actually. And showing that to energy companies, they were a bit surprised because simply looking at their data, they might have had anemometers, which are the things that measure wind speed, in for a couple of years, but that's not enough to get a full picture of how much things can vary. And then on top of that, climate change, right? And so this is a really new space in that area. So within our project, we're going to be doing things like benchmarking and evaluating some of the observational data sets and the model data sets, the climate model data sets, to see kind of what the range of what we should expect around things like wind and solar and water as well. I mean, we haven't even talked about precipitation, which is crucial for a water resource, for agriculture, for water resources, for supplies to cities and towns. This is part of the project that we're doing, is we really want to get a handle on this data, because without it and without knowledge on that best practice, energy companies, the government, whoever else is building and planning for these things don't have the best information at their disposal to be able to do things in the most efficient way. And so this is what we're trying to achieve, one of the things we're trying to achieve.
There is something in Australia too called the ISP, I can't remember what it stands for. Is it the Integrated Services Plan or something like that AEMO has set up? And it's basically our roadmap to renewables by 2050. And it's actually really fascinating, like to see that there is this roadmap. So first of all, that's really exciting. But second of all, how ambitious the developments need to be. It's doable from what I hear, but it is very ambitious, and there's a huge reliance on a continual increase in the uptake of like rooftop solar, utility solar, and all of this is based, as Ailie has said, on their information, which is not necessarily useless. It is still very useful, but it doesn't incorporate the whole spectrum of long-term change and weather change and climate change in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is where, when you're making these billion-dollar decisions too, this is the thing. You want to have that best information at your disposal. And they're absolutely doing it with the best information that they have at the moment.
Absolutely.
That's without a doubt. But the question that we have is, can we provide them with better information? And we think we can. And so that's really what we're tracking to try and do, particularly in the spaces of, as we said, renewable energy. And the other big one for us is water and water resources.
So I just wanted to clarify, I just Googled ISP and it's the Integrated System Plan, and it's put together by the Australian Energy Market Operator, or AEMO.
So we live in this country of droughts and flooding rains where the weather can be very variable and sometimes can be extreme. How do weather resources in Australia compare and differ from other parts of the world?
It's a good question. And my gosh, I mean, I know this is going to be broadcast later in the year, but the droughts and the flooding rains, we've got both at the moment. It's pretty crazy as of, where are we, May 2025. Look, I think Australia is rather rich in resources for energy, or types of energy, solar and wind. So we're obviously a massive country in the subtropics. We have an awful lot of sunshine here compared to the rest of the world. So we really do have a lot of solar resource. I mean, this is why Australian houses probably have the largest uptake of solar in the entire world, because it's sunny all the time. Well, not all the time, but yeah, we do. We have the largest uptake of solar, rooftop solar in the world.
By a long shot per capita, it's huge.
Yeah, exactly. And like if you just drive around the suburbs of Australia and rooftop solar is on every kind of third house. It's quite incredible. So we have that really strong solar resource. We're obviously have a huge coastline as well. That makes the wind resource really strong. Maybe not as good as if we were in the mid-latitudes a bit further south. Places like Scandinavia in the northern hemisphere, it's just windy there all the time. So, but
they have
a really good wind resource. But, because we're coastal, we have that resource, right? Where we are perhaps a little less flush with resources is around water, I think. Although that's not true. We are flush with water resources, but in the areas of the country where it's difficult to move that water around. So, for example, in the tropical north of Australia, we have huge water resources, with monsoons and things like that. Very high precipitation, but where most people live, which is largely in the southeast, the southwest, it's smack bang in the middle of the subtropics. And so it can, and people know it can get very, very dry. And so we do have to worry about that variability. So not only that climate variability, but the variability in the weather, because something that we've learned recently in the last 5 years or so is that the weather timescales of how the rain falls, for example, is actually super important. When it falls, the time of year it falls. Just to take an example here in Victoria at the moment, we've got a drought happening in Western Victoria and Southeast and South Australia. And one of the big problems at this time of year is that we haven't had those kind of days of heavy rainfall, which is what germinates the seeds for the winter wheat crop, right? We've had some rainfall. It's been okay. And things are in Western Victoria, they're really worried about that because not only have they just had over a year of general dry conditions, now when we're pushing into the time of the year, it's May when we're recording this, so we're pushing in the time of the year that should be traditionally the wetter time of year, so they're kind of preparing. It's not raining and they need those single day or multi-day events of kind of 20, 30 mil to supply enough soil moisture to get those seeds germinating in the first place. And so that's not about rainfall over a month or rainfall, that's about a single event or a couple of those events that drop a whole heap of rain to kickstart that cropping season. And if it's missing, having rainfall of less than a mil every day for a month is not the same as having that big soaking rain that they need. So that's why I'm saying framing resources in this weather context is actually really, really important, even for things that we may not traditionally think of as in a weather context like droughts or stuff like that.
It's raining here, by the way.
It is actually.
Just as Ailie embarked upon the point of it not raining enough in Victoria, it's like just started chucking it down.
It hurt
So
me.
it's been pouring here for about 12, 24 hours. I'm thinking if only this system could make its way down to Victoria. I don't know if it is.
I was going to say, I don't know that it's chucking it down outside. This is, it's not that heavy.
It's raining. It's just raining.
But
it's just raining.
But I mean, at this time, this is the point, right? At this time of the year, we would have expected those chucking it down rains to happen 2 or 3 times already. We would have expected a couple of days where you get kind of at least here in Melbourne, where you get kind of the 20, 30 mil, there's big puddles and it's just that day where you kind of do need to remember your umbrella.
Yep.
Whereas today, like even though there's 8 mils or something or up to 8 mils forecast, it's still that rain where, you know what, I forgot my umbrella probably doesn't really matter.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's not going to be chucking it down all day.
Well, the good news for me is the umbrella is here in the office.
So
I
have
now.
a spare if you want to borrow one. Ailie, I'll send it down to you.
Send it the virtual umbrella.
Do you want the child umbrella or the adult umbrella? The choice is yours.
Are you going to send him an emoji of an umbrella lately and say, here
you go. It's chucking, like it is chucking it down here. So I am very much willing this rainfall down to Victoria right now. We've our backyard's got like that layer of rain or water sitting on top of it. Yeah, which sounds exactly like what the farmers need right now.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I mean, but even my garden needs it. It's our tanks are empty. Like it's
yeah.
It should have started raining by now, and it hasn't.
Yeah.
It is those kind of single or multi-day events that really contribute most of the rainfall. I mean, I think there's a stat that we looked at in a couple of papers recently that kind of says that depending where you are, obviously, but, around here, half of your annual rainfall is coming from the top 10 or 20 wettest days.
Mm.
And that's true around Australia that, and particularly as you get into the more arid regions, that starts to be more like 60, 70, 80% of your total rainfall for the year comes from
a handful of really big, heavy days.
Yeah, that's right. So that makes it a weather problem, right? And so this is why we want to look at weather resources, not thinking about – oftentimes people have looked at these resources before, particularly when it comes to water, but they look at it over the course of months or seasons or years and think about it that way. And that's a really great way to look at it when you're thinking about kind of averages. But I suppose what we're saying is that the weather actually makes that average. And we think that that's the really important part that we need to focus on because it's those big, heavy rainfall systems that are changing the most. And so that's where our focus should be.
So we've already talked a little bit about the data that it's required to understand weather resources. What existing data and information do we have on weather resources in Australia currently?
Yeah, look, this is a really good question. And I think this is one of those areas that has the potential to become problematic into the future. And what I mean by that is that this is not just around Australia, this is worldwide, but particularly in Australia, there's been a move towards having fewer surface observations, more high frequency, but like we have a lot less rain gauges now than we used to. Yeah, we have a lot less temperature gauges now than we used to. They've all been automated, and it's because people used to, it used to be Joe Blogs down at the post office who'd be reading the rain gauge every morning, and that doesn't happen anymore. But I think it is a real worry, particularly when it comes to some of the variables that we don't think about that often, like wind, right? Wind observations are a real problem in this country because you put in your fancy little anemometer or whatever you put in, which is the little thing with the cups that spins around and measures wind speed. And that's great, but you put it in like a field and then a tree grows in the field. And then that completely changes how the wind interacts with that anemometer. And so getting a long-term understanding of the winds and how they change is then disrupted by that tree, right?
Yeah.
And so observations like that are really, really difficult. And it would be great to have them everywhere. But like, as I said, wind, I know that there's been efforts for a long time in trying to create a really good observational wind data set that have failed because it's too hard, basically. And I mean, the good thing about these days is we do have remotely sensed data, right? We have radar, we have satellites and things like that, but that doesn't provide us with everything, and it still provides, we still require interpretation. Just take satellites, for example. And one of the things I would say is it would be nice to have more data. So, I would love it. Hint, hint, if the federal government would fund a whole lot more surface observations, because I think we need to have these long-term maintained surface sites so we can not only, like, we can ground truth, we can sanity check what the satellites are telling us, right? We don't know whether it's good from what the satellites are. I mean, we can have a good idea, we can have some observation somewhere, but if we had more, we'd be able to get a much better handle on what our resources actually are, because that's a big problem. We actually don't know what our resources are to any degree of super high accuracy because of the problems I've just mentioned.
So I just wanted to talk about rain and sunlight, but now we're asking what is truth?
Exactly.
Yeah,
this gets very existential very quickly.
But I think this is something that's become increasingly, that climate scientists have become increasingly aware of in the last decade or so, that just because you have one set of observations doesn't mean it's truth. It's the closest we've got to it. And in some locations, we may only have one set of observations or a satellite record or a reanalysis product. But we are now much more aware that there's a range of uncertainty around that, a range of possible truths that we haven't been able to measure for whatever reason. And we need to take that into account, whether it's weather resources or any other climate or weather entity, because one set of observation generally isn't enough, particularly if it's quite short in its record as well.
But using that example that Sarah just gave, I mean, this is exactly why we can say what we can about climate change, for example, because we have multiple truths from multiple lines of evidence from, like, temperature is one of those things that actually is really well measured. So we have information from satellites, we have information from surface gauges, we have information from a huge array of data, and all of it points in the same direction, right? And so we have a range, but it all points in the same direction. And so then we are confident that climate change and global warming is happening because we have these multiple lines of evidence. But what I'm saying is we haven't looked at that for these other variables at this time. And so when we're thinking about resources, we have to do the same thing that we've done for climate change for wind, but wind on weather timescales. People might have looked at wind, seasonal averages, things like that. But what we're saying is actually the diurnal cycle, so how wind changes from day to night, is really important. How wind gusts between the day, how variable those gusts are is really important, because wind turbines have to be shut down if it's too gusty, right? And so trying to understand that, we need those multiple lines of evidence, just like we had with global temperature observations, to be able to say those things. So that's one of the things that we really are trying to collate and put together, is those data sets for various things, not just rainfall, not just wind, solar, as many things as we can look at, basically, that are important for weather as a resource in Australia.
I think, I like your call to the government to fund more of these, these data sets and these stations. If we are going to reach this ISP and reach net zero in our energy or our electricity by 2050, we need to better record the environment that we're putting these resources in.
And I think the other thing that I would, going to get on my high horse and do lots of call outs here. I mean, I would also call out private industry. I mean, I know that, commercial in confidence, and this is making them a lot of money, but there's also a heck of a lot of data that they have that is not shared with researchers.
That's very true.
That data can be really valuable and can tell us lots of interesting things, which is why they want to hold on to it. I get that. I get that they want that commercial advantage. But I don't know, I'm a bit altruistic like this. I kind of think, how good would it be if they all just got together and said, you know what, we want to do what's best for the good of everyone. Let's just share our data and have it open source. And there's so much we could do, much we could do with that.
So within in the centre, what kind of work are we doing to learn more about weather resources?
So we're doing a whole heap of work. We're kind of concentrating at the moment on 3 different, I suppose, sectors or areas of weather resources, because there's so many, right? It's kind of this very open thing that you can think about resources in so many different ways. So the 2 that we're concentrating on the most are the 2 that I've talked about the most, which is really around water resources and thinking about precipitation and things like that, but also around renewable energy, so wind and solar. And of course, precipitation comes into that because we can't forget that we have hydro in this country, even though we are a fairly arid country. There are areas that are not. Tasmania, for example, is powered pretty much by hydroelectricity. So we need to think about hydroelectricity as well. And so we're looking at a few different elements of weather resources. The first element is that data truth that I just spoke about. So that's a really important part of things, collating these data sets, putting them together, seeing what do all the different observational data sets tell us about how wind varies on weather timescales. What do they tell us about how often we might expect periods of really low wind where actually we need to, like the wind turbines literally won't turn, things like that. So we're looking at those data sets. We're also looking at benchmarking climate models. So this is really looking at climate models to see, compared to the observations where they sit as well, to see how well they simulate these types of things. So that's a very data-focused kind of project. But the other side of things is really understanding the processes of what drives weather resources. So drives their variability, drives their change. We've been able to learn a lot in the past kind of 5 to 10 years around things like drought, for example, and how weather plays a massive role in drought in this country, much bigger role than we might previously thought. And so using that idea, well, hang on a second, can't we look at water resources now from that weather frame to understand how those weather processes affect our water resources? If we take that stat that I gave before, that kind of, anywhere from 50, 60% of total rainfall that we get in a year is coming from these singular heavy rainfall events, we damn well better know about what those events are doing if we want to understand how they're going to change in the future. So understanding those processes, understanding what's happening with the weather systems is a really important part of this. Likewise, that was a water resource example, but we want to do that for renewable energy as well. So really looking at those kind of particular weather systems and saying, well, hang on a second, what happens to our renewable energy resources when we get a mid-latitude low pressure system? What happens when we get these big high pressure systems that sit over the country? How does that change renewable energy resource? So that's kind of the very process part of this, which is another big factor. And then the other factor that we want to look at is predictability. So this is thinking about prediction on multiple scales. So it's not only thinking about how's this going to change and thinking about weather change into the future in 2050, 2070 and beyond. It's also thinking about very short-term predictability. So it's thinking about actually, can we, with any degree of skill, find out if we're going to get a wind drought in the next 2 weeks? Can we, with any degree of skill, find out if we're going to get drought-breaking rains in the next, So thinking about that from both weather perspectives, but also longer timescales, months ahead, and then weather change on climate change timescales, that predictability is something that we would like to start focusing on. We're not focusing on it right now, but definitely hoping to focus on that in the next couple of years.
So kind of on that issue of predictability, where do you think we currently sit with being able to predict things like wind droughts and drought-breaking rains longer than a couple of weeks? So, on a seasonal scale or even, years ahead, do we have any skill currently? What does that look like?
I think we do have a modicum of skill.
Little baby.
Yeah. So, look, I think, and this kind of comes back to the process part as well, because I think these are all interrelated, right?
Yeah.
Until we understand the processes that change the weather resources, we don't know how they can be predicted because we need to look at how the models predict those processes, right?
Yeah.
Now, there is evidence that there's certainly skill around things like rainfall with various large-scale climate modes like the El Niño Southern Oscillation, so El Niño, La Niña, and similar ones that are associated with the Indian Ocean and things like that. But people have looked at them on kind of looking at seasonal totals of rainfall and things like that. But you can kind of implicitly think, well, hang on, if the seasonal totals are governed, though, by these short-term weather processes, surely there must be some skill in predicting those short-term weather processes. And I'm not saying, oh, yeah, in 3 months' time on August 26th, we're going to get a big heavy rainfall event. That's not the type of prediction I'm talking about here. That's weather prediction where we can say, this is how much we expect at this time, blah, blah, blah. What we're talking about is, we're more likely to get one of these events in this situation or not. So in a La Niña, we're more likely to get these heavy rain events. In La Niña, we're more likely to get these stalling weather systems off the coast, things like that. Now, the short answer is that work hasn't been done on a lot of those weather systems. And so this is something where I really think we do need to focus on 21st century weather, not just in the Weather Resources Project, but across the projects.
I would even argue there's a communication issue there as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, above the research, but something that we should address in 21st century weather. I say that, creating more work for ourselves. But with forecasting and probability and more likely, and even looking at the seasonal timescale, that's not well interpreted if you're outside of the realm of weather and climate. And I even just saw an article just the other day. In this region in Australia, we haven't received much rainfall until now, basically. And these farmers were saying that the Bureau promised them 80 mils of rainfall in whatever months prior. And that's the thing. We don't promise anything. The Bureau doesn't promise anything. It predicts the likelihood of certain amounts of rainfall falling. So that's something that we need to address, I think, as well, to better get the message across about how we communicate this and what we're saying when we predict some of these things.
Yeah, 100%, Sarah. And I mean, I could go off on a tangent about this for a very long time because I think one of the major problems is that we, and when I say we, I'm talking people in general, do not understand probabilities.
No.
And I think even people who are trained don't understand probabilities. Just as an anecdote, I had an honours student a couple of years ago who was looking at how people interpreted the Bureau's weather forecasts, right? Yeah. The rainfall forecasts. And she did some great work where she surveyed people and she gave them a kind of high school example of probability. You have black balls and red balls in a bag and you close your eyes and you pull out one. How confident are you? You've got 10 balls. How confident are you that one of them will be red or whatever? Then she changed that example to an analogous example of rainfall, right? So it was exactly the same thing, but it was with rainfall. Not that you get rainfall out of a bag, but
let's try. Challenge accepted.
It was the same probability concept, but with rainfall. And to start off with, I should say the one with the bag analogy, only about 50% of people got that right, by the way.
Right.
Or 50 to 60% of people got that right. Or no, I think it was 50%. And if they had university maths, it went up to like 60% or something like that. Like it was really, it was really terrifying. I should say this is the Victorian population, so I'm not putting any shade on the rest of Australia.
Well, I mean, if we can't do it, they definitely can't.
That's right, exactly. But the interesting thing was that when it came to rainfall, the number of people who got the answer correct went down. Basically, it halved. And so there was this inbuilt bias that people had around rainfall. And it just really showed us that there's this real disconnect. And this was just one example, but there was this disconnect between how people interpreted this rainfall forecast and the probabilities than an actual probability example. So there's something going on there that people don't connect
understand
probabilities correctly when it comes to the weather.
They think weather is yes or no. Will it rain or not?
Yeah, exactly. And so this desire for a set, what we would call in the biz, deterministic outcome, when that is not how it works, is a real problem to communicate. It's a real problem. And it's a problem not only for things like seasonal forecasts and forecasting that is beyond that kind of 1 to 2 week timescale. It's a big problem for climate change. I mean, this is one of the reasons why scientists talk so much around uncertainty. It's not that we're uncertain about things. It's just that it's a probabilistic frame. It's a risk frame, right?
Yeah.
It is. We're not saying, we don't know about this, that, or the other. It's that the evidence has spread. And so that's where the problems come in, because talking about things in probabilities does not compute for a lot of people, even very well-educated people.
Look, I've even had experiences at home where we're both looking at the app, my husband and I. He's like, oh, it's going to rain a lot today. And I'm like, it's a shower or two, and a probability of anything above 4 mils not being very high. And it's that sort of, again, the yes or no, there's a cloud on the app, or there's an indication of at least some rainfall. So therefore that means it's going to rain a lot and it's pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah.
And that's very common, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's something that our role as communicators as well, to try and do what we can to keep hammering home that message that it's not a yes or no answer. There are shades of grey.
Many.
Yeah, I think this is a problem bigger than us, though.
Yeah. Although I feel a project coming on, Iain.
Yeah.
The Shades of Grey project?
As long as there's not 50 of them, I think we're
right. Well,
good.
that's 50.
We're going to punish
50
people for
shades
not
of grey
understanding
cloud.
probabilistic forecasts.
No. Oh, dear.
You mentioned climate change in that previous response, Ailie, and I'm interested to know how we expect our weather resources to change as the climate changes. Is that something that we can predict easily or not?
Well, that's a good question, and I think the short answer is we don't know how our weather resources are going to change. This is the whole point of doing the project that we're doing, is to try and understand that. But I think we can say, look, everything about our weather is being touched by climate change now. So they will change. But how much they change and the direction of that change, I think, is still a very open question. And some of these weather resources, precipitation is something that's been studied for a long time, right? And so there's areas of confidence that we can have in some of that. But things like solar and wind resource have not been studied extensively. And even other things like resources that I haven't even talked about today, thinking about kind of resources around who we are, for example, as Australians, and, cultural lifestyle kind of weather resources. That sounds silly, but, we do peg some of our, I suppose, our collective personality on some of these resources. You mentioned one before. What would happen if Australia was no longer a land of drought and flooding rains, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but what is the thing that the Australians love to do the most? Talk about the weather. Right? Every time you see someone, it's been hot, it's been this, it's been that. So there are cultural aspects to this as well.
Going to the beach, having a barbecue.
Exactly. So what
cricket.
happens if we are no longer beach bunnies? Because we can't be because it's too hot? Or what happens if, here in Victoria, a big one is around snow. Yeah. I know we're not exactly known for our ski industry, but we have a ski industry for now. But what happens if that, and to be honest, it's not looking good.
Yeah.
What happens if that disappears in the next 10 to 20 years? How does that affect who we are? These are kind of getting into the existential stuff again, but these are deep things. I'm a Melburnian. I pride our city on the fact that everybody thinks we have terrible weather. What happens if we don't have terrible weather anymore?
Have either of you seen the Barbie movie with Margot Robbie?
Yeah, for sure.
No, I have not actually.
Oh, it's a really good movie. I went in with very low expectations, and it touches on a lot of really deep topics, but in a very creative and fun way. Anyway, Ryan Gosling's character, Ken, his job is to beach. That's all he does.
His job is just beach.
Well, there you go. That's his resource.
Beach,
not lifeguard, which is a common misconception.
No,
It's just beach.
It's just beach. And I think Australians, what do we do in summer? Beach. Everything's beach.
Yeah.
That's taken away, or if that shifts to a different time of year.
If it changes, exactly.
Yeah, who are we? What do we do?
Well, exactly. And I think there's deeper stuff around, not just beach. We're a very outdoorsy nation in general.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? Or even things like some of our, what I would call cultural assets. Think about the Great Barrier Reef, right?
Yeah.
That probably is not going to be around in its current form for too much longer. That's a source of national pride. And what happens when that goes? That is a resource to this country, right?
Yeah. Well, we make money off it, right, from tourism.
Absolutely.
And,
exactly.
Putting aside the intrinsic value, which is
exactly. And so this is what I kind of, I'm kind of coming full circle here. But, when we're talking about weather resources, I think we not only have to think about these very tangible examples around, economy and blah, 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 but we also have to think about the intangible.
Yeah.
Those things that are important to us as a nation and who we are, because those are resources as well. And quite frankly, a lot of them are tied to the weather.
If you think about also changes we may see in fire weather that's predicted in the future, and the broadening of the fire season, particularly towards spring,
Yep.
there's a lot of intrinsic value that's at risk there. Just in that, and that is a resource to us as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now I can't even remember what the original question was.
Well, I was going to say.
I think I've deviated hugely. But
No, that's fine. I usually go on so many tangents, so it's actually nice to have a guest on who does the same thing.
Sarah, I wonder if your weather resources are running low because you've been plunged into
darkness.
semi-darkness.
I know.
there.
I haven't been using, so the lights in here are automatic to save electricity. It's a 6-star building, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
so I
you
haven't
need to
been
do
doing
the-
this enough.
Be an octopus.
I'll turn on my light. I'll turn my lights back on. But
Okay.
I've been trying so hard to sit like still and not move my arms. It's worked against me. So in Australia, who are we working with to learn more about weather resources? And actually, maybe not just in Australia, but globally as well.
All the people.
All of them.
Yeah, that was by taking it
Next
globally.
question.
You made that very broad.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things I find most exciting about this project, actually, is that we do get to be very outward facing and we do get to do a lot of cool things with a lot of awesome groups. So from the industry standpoint, we're working with energy companies, we're working with the government, and they're really interested in our work to try and understand, particularly around energy resources. Obviously, an energy company is going to be interested in that, but the government as well, and water resources as well. We're working with various state and the federal government on that, and so it's really great working with them because in that partnership, they can help us target some of the big questions that they have. And, we can help answer some of those so that they can make better decisions fundamentally. We're also working really closely with the Bureau of Meteorology, for example. I mentioned the prediction aspect. So, that's one of the things that we're looking at, and we're working with their team particularly around numerical weather prediction, which is basically weather timescale prediction, to really understand some of the key aspects of weather resources on that timescale. And obviously we've got our international partners as well through Europe, through North America, Asia, working with researchers as well to really understand some of the world-leading stuff that's going on in this space. Europe is leading the charge, for example, on renewable energy research, and so learning from them is really something that we are doing and plan to continue to do moving forward.
So we've been using the term weather change, which you mentioned earlier, and weather resources, obviously, or weather as a resource. Do you know of anywhere else in the world that are using those terms, or is it just us here?
No, I think it's just us, actually. I've been kind of touting this term weather resources. I mean, people talk about them. It's a really interesting, again, we're going to get deep here, but it's a really interesting term because people have started thinking about it. And when we kind of say weather is the resource, they're like, oh, no, but you get the resources from the weather. And we say, well, no, you don't. The resources are the weather, actually.
No
because
sun,
if you
no
think
solar
about
at the end.
what weather is, weather doesn't, we're using the weather itself to make energy. We are using the weather itself to get the water that we need. The water resource is the weather resource. It's coming from the sky, most of it. Not all of it, but most of it's coming from the sky, right?
Well, at some point it has to come from the sky.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's really interesting because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a little bit of a push around the what's called the ecosystem services literature. I don't know if you know the ecosystem services area, but this is basically saying ecosystems of themselves are resources effectively, or services they called them, right? But a lot of that was talking about climate. It was talking about averages. It was talking about atmospheric chemistry and air pollution and things like that, as in oxygen in the air is the resource, right? Which it is. But I suppose taking that and then moving it forward to where we are now, this is where we're arguing that it's more than that. It's more than the climate. And in fact, it's the weather time scale that matters. And so this is why we've come up with this term, weather resources. And the feedback so far is that people actually love it. They're like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about this before, because everybody's always thinks about weather in a risk frame, right? Not a resource frame. And so we're so used to sitting there going, and making our decisions on weather around risk. Oh, is it going to rain? Oh, is it going to,
will I bring my umbrella today?
Will I bring my umbrella? But you don't have that same thought process if it's a sunny day outside.
No.
Right?
Oh, maybe to the extent of should I put sunscreen on and how much?
Right,
but
exactly. Things like that, right?
But that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, and so weather resources is something that I can say is a 21st century weather thing.
Absolutely.
And so far it's been really well received, I think, because I think people really connect with the idea. And once you explain what it is, they go, oh, yeah, it is. I've never thought about it that way before.
Well, even Christian, who's the director of the centre, has, he makes a very valid point when he's introducing the centre that for so long we've sheltered from the weather, but to get us to net zero, it doesn't matter where we are in the world, to get us to net zero, we need to harness it and use the weather appropriately as a resource.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, he also says that
we should probably get him on at some point.
I know, we're giving him a lot of kudos here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he also says we are becoming more dependent on the weather than we have been
100%.
any time in history. And I think he's right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and let's not mistake this here. This is weather. We are becoming dependent on weather.
Yes.
Not just outside climate, blah, blah, blah. It's weather. And so this is why this idea of weather resources is really key here, because I personally think we need to stop thinking about – we shouldn't stop thinking about weather in the risk frame. That would be a really dangerous thing to do. We absolutely need to do that. But we need to also think about weather as a resource,
100%.
because we have an opportunity now during this transition to do things better, to make our systems the most energy systems I'm talking about, water resource systems, everything that our lifestyles depend upon. We have the opportunity to make things the best they can be, given the lot we've been dealt with climate change. Right? Yeah. Given what's happening with climate change, we need to do our best to try and adapt to that. How are we going to do that? We need to know what the weather's doing, and we need to know how to use the resources in the best way that they can be used.
And again, I know I've mentioned it a few times, but the ISP to get us to renewables in Australia, in our electricity sector, we need to quadruple the amount of solar generation and energy generation alone that has to come from renewables, because if we electrify the economy, as well as thinking about the distribution, which you touched on earlier, we need to generate a lot more power for that to happen. So to do that, we need to harness the weather effectively.
Yeah. So we damn well better know how it works.
Yep. And make sure that everything's connected properly.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a failure at the moment.
But I mean, this is the other thing as well is this is why it's so important for us to work with the government partners and with the energy industry partners and all the other partners we're working with, because, I mean, we can sit here and say, oh, yeah, we need to do this.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this weather. But the point is, if that information is not getting where it needs to go, then we've failed in what we've done. And if we're writing love letters to ourselves in journals and that's all we're doing, this is not going to work, right?
And I think, look, I'm going to this is my opinion, so I don't know if other climate scientists feel this way, especially here in Australia. But I feel like previously that's what we've done. We've kind of said, oh, this is what you need to know. Oh, this is what we can and can't do for you. And by you, I mean our industry partners, our government partners. Walked away, maybe come back a couple of years later, had the same conversation, walked away again.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're trying to do in this centre. We are working with them as closely as we can. And I think it's to our credit. I know it's, we've gotten here a bit late, but at least we're here now and trying to do it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we can't not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much important information and there's so many questions that they want to ask. Like every time I meet with them, they're constantly asking these questions. Oh, do you know this yet? Do you know this yet? Do you know this yet?
Yeah.
And we want to be able to target what we're doing to be able to answer some of those questions, right?
And if we can't do it now, well, then let's make a plan to work towards that in the future.
Exactly.
Instead of just going, no, it's too hard basket.
Hopefully some of those people we're talking about, our partners in industry and in government, might be listening to this episode.
I hope
if we've politely asked them to check it out. But also, if you're a member of the general public, whatever you're doing, you might be a teacher or you might be working in, industry, you might be, whatever you're doing. If you're listening to this, what can people do to acknowledge this new concept of weather resources and to start thinking about it in their lives and taking action to integrate this kind of thinking into how they are structuring their choices?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I've got some suggestions, but Ailie's the guest.
No, I've got to think about this one, Sarah, so you can go ahead if you want, because that's a deep question.
So I know it's not available to everyone, depending on where they live or their financial situation, but certainly working towards a future where they can generate their own energy is a step in the right direction. And again, it's not something that's available for everyone. But we need to come off fossil fuels. And even in the future, this uptake that Australia's had in rooftop solar, that needs to continue. So if we can do that, and solar panels are getting more and more efficient month on month and cheaper as well. So if it's something that people can work towards, yes, they may not be able to do it now, but maybe in a few years' time, that helps. It helps harness the weather as appropriate to their area and turn it into a resource right at the source where they need to use it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I'd go further too. And I would say, I think because it's so innocuous and it's every day and we're in it all the time, there's very little explicit acknowledgement or realisation of the effect that weather has on our everyday lives, whether that be positive or negative. But we kind of only notice it when it's negative. So I suppose what I would say is I think start noticing the weather. I remember back in even high school doing these water footprint calculators, where you would think about where water went into every part of your life. It went into making your jeans. It went into making your food. It went into, and thinking about your water footprint, it's way more than what you use to take a shower and have a couple of glasses of water and cook your food in your house. It's way more than that, right? It's everything. It's inextricably linked to everything that we do in our lives.
Yeah.
And I would argue that weather's the same. So why don't we have a weather resources footprint calculator, right? Everything that we do from whether we need to chuck our clothes in the dryer and use electricity to whether we can put it out in the Hills hoist in the backyard to whether we want to go and watch the footy on the weekend because it's going to be pouring with rain, or we want to go to the cricket match because it's going to be 40 degrees or it's going to be a nice sunny day, or whether we can go on that summer holiday to Queensland or whether there's going to be, it's too hot or it's flooding or whatever it is. Even the everyday, how is weather related to your lives? And I think that's a big step forward because I think, as I said, I think we too often look at weather only in a risk frame, but it provides so much to us that I think we need to rethink how we appreciate and interact with the weather in our everyday lives.
Cool. I think just for benefit of people who may be listening overseas, a Hills hoist is effectively a big wiry clothesline that a lot of Australians at least used to have in their backyard. I remember we had like a really big metal one. They seem to be getting smaller and smaller as time goes on. But that's effectively, we really rely on the sun to dry our clothes because we have a lot of it. And I know in other countries dryers are more prominent, but yeah, that's what a Hills hoist
I should say that they were also great for jumping on and spinning, like excess playground equipment, like spinning around, like you'd hang off them. And then your parents would yell at you because you were going to break the thing because you were hanging off the edge.
And then there's also Gooner Fortune, which...
Oh, yeah, let's not get into that. Oh, my gosh, these Australian cultural...
I know, right. I'm not even sure if everyone knows what goon is, so I might not enlighten them.
Let's just say it's wine in a bag and it gets attached to a Hills hoist. That's all we need to say.
I think that's a myth, like a drop bear. I don't think it actually happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
Anyway.
When I first moved to Australia in, would have been 1999, I think, I went to a friend's house for a sleepover at school, and he was horrified that I was leaving the tap running while brushing my teeth.
Well, yeah, that was drummed into
I'm horrified at you.
But, I mean, I just come from a country where we have nothing but rain, and I was like, what's the problem here? You know?
No.
That is drummed into us, of all things. Yeah.
I remember having a heart attack when I lived in the United States for a couple of years, and I remember having a heart attack when I went over to somebody's house and they were washing the dishes in the sink with the tap running rather than filling up. And I was having a mild panic attack in the background going, just... Can you turn it off? Can you just fill it up? Please. Can you just do it? Like, it doesn't need to be running the whole time. No. Stop.
I'm going to squeeze in today's Simpsons reference as well because when Ailie...
I've been wondering when we didn't have a time machine reference, so I'm glad we've been able to bring the Simpsons in.
There's an episode. It's not a golden era one. It's just after it where Lisa's in a spelling bee, an international spelling bee, like the Spell Olympics, I think it's called. And the organisers don't want her or another person to win. They've decided who they want to win to be like the face of the spelling bee moving forward. So they're setting them up to fail. And I don't think it's Lisa. I think it's the other girl. And they ask her, spell weather. And she's like, can you use it in a sentence? And the man says, I wonder whether the weather will improve. And you were saying, whether it's going to rain or whether it's going to be sunny. I'm like, weather.
So I didn't realise I used to do this until an undergrad from a few years ago pointed this out, that when I would say weather, like whether you choose to or not, I would still spell it like weather, as in what happens in the sky. I had no idea I was doing that.
You just got weather on the brain,
cute,
Sarah.
Pardon?
You just got weather on the brain.
I know. Well, they said it like, it fits, right? But yeah, I had no idea. I obviously know the difference, but I just, it's so ingrained.
That's exactly what someone who doesn't know the difference would say after being called out on it.
No
That's
comment.
all right.
I wonder whether you do know the difference or not.
Whether, yeah. All right, I'm going to leave that one there. I'm just going to dig myself a bigger hole.
I think we've reached a natural conclusion to this wonderful discussion of weather resources.
So hopefully we've made it clear from this episode that weather isn't just a backdrop to our lives. It's a resource that we depend on every day.
And in a warming world, understanding how it's changing could help us prepare and adapt better, because Australia runs on weather.
Thanks very much to Ailie for joining us. Next up, we're taking a journey inwards to think about the psychology of the climate crisis.
How do you cope with the knowledge that the world is changing irrevocably around us?
What are the factors that influence human behaviour at an individual and societal level as emissions and temperatures continue to rise?
For the answers to those questions and plenty more, join us for the next episode of Totally Cooked.
And we'll tackle the climate crisis together.
Cool.
Cool.
Look at
I'm
you
happy.
two.
Yeah, we've